right? Don't leave your drink out. Don't just leave it there, go away for 30 minutes, come back and think that it's all good in the neighborhood with your drink, right? So I would say practice all the safety things that you learned as you're entering WSU or when you were before WSU, whatever it is. You should always practice those safety things also in Europe. So absolutely no leaving like your drinks and then thinking that it's going to be okay to just pick that same drink up, right? Because you never know what's happening there. Like for everyone holding your drink with your hand above the open surface, right? You know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense? Helps to prevent anyone from dropping anything into your drink. At least that I heard of, no one told me that their drink was ever spiked. Yeah. But what about the Snapchat thing? So you're doing something unfavorable, you're doing something that you don't want to have documented, someone documents it and posts it on their Snapchat. How would you all respond to that? Everyone's cool in the neighborhood with it?
Probably ask the individual being intoxicated if not appropriate, probably talk to the person who did that and then have them take it off right away. And probably just like have a serious conversation with them.
Yeah, going back to that Snapchat thing, that's a huge thing, and I think it's important that although you are intoxicated, you should be aware of your actions because they could come back and haunt you. Mm-hmm. So we have a friend, mutual friend, that is very Muslim, very traditional household. She, on the other half, is Muslim, but she's not practicing, and she's a huge coup. She loves to party. And she was tailgating as an alumni, and got a beer and was like cracking it on her head to open it and then chug it. That made Coog memes, it made Coog videos. Mm-hmm. She was on like all kinds of stuff, and so she was out, and she's a professional, a pharmacist.
Yeah.
And in Seattle,
yeah.
And it made all this thing, and she was freaking out because her family could see that. They are part of the kook system as well. Yeah. And so it's super embarrassing, and she now has to live in fear when it comes to college game days. That video will always resurface. Yeah. And so it's super, you have to be careful because social media will catch up to you if people are out there with their video cameras. So.
Right. And the reason I brought that up is because that's going to be one of the topics you all are going to be talking about during your conduct contract that this class gets to create. All the scenarios in here that are in your workbook, they actually came up in program in the past 4 years. And so how can we make sure to address if an action occurs, what are the consequences, how are we going to hold folks accountable? Oftentimes we never did like this type of scenario things when we talked about conduct prior to this semester. And so oftentimes students will be like, well, they're adults, like let them do them. But then they get to country and it impacts their experience because somebody else is messing up or somebody else is ruining it for them, right? So imagine being in a classroom, your professor is getting irritated because 15 minutes into the lecture, folks are coming in late. So he decides, I'm going to cancel class, you all do the reading on your own, study for the exam that's happening tomorrow, I'm done. Leaves class. That impacts your experience even though you're not the student that was late, right? And so think about those types of things when you're putting together your conduct contract because we need to be able to hold folks accountable, and it only works when folks here have buy-in, right? Like I helped to create this contract, I believe in this contract, I think that this is the best way to hold students accountable. And so I want you all to keep that in mind as you maybe complete the rest of this workbook and as you think about the conduct contract for next week. Okay, so for now, go ahead and put away your notebooks. So the first question in this workbook was, what is ethnocentrism? So does anybody know what ethnocentrism wants to help define it? If you don't know it, look it up on your phone. Someone, give me a definition of ethnocentrism. Okay, Matt.
Ethnocentrism is that, like, when you're going to like another culture, you go with the mindset that yours is superior.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you go with the mindset that your culture is superior. You go with the mindset of like, even if we take out the superiority of a culture, right? You go in saying like, this is my culture, and this is how I'm going to act because this is my culture, right? There are, I think, extreme examples of ethnocentrism where it is talking about superiority, it is talking about like, no, that sucks, this is the best, no, that's weird, this is cool. But there are also small things that folks maybe are not more aware of, right? It's not like you're trying to be ethnocentric, but it surfaces, right? Especially in class discussions when you're learning about a different culture. So one of the things that I want you to think about, and all of you completed your values inventory, right? Talked about like, where are you on the range of individualistic, where are you on the range of being community-oriented, things like that. So think about that. In that values inventory, you can compare your values with the typical values of someone who lives in Spain. I encourage you to check that out and see where your values fall in that range, right? Because, especially in the class, something that we talked about is that whenever you're thinking about a statement like, oh, but in the US, ... you may be saying something ethnocentric, right? Or when you're experiencing something and you're like, well, if other people aren't comfortable with it, that's okay because I'm comfortable with it. A good example of this is when we were in Morocco. We had, so we went to the beach. Every day that you're in Morocco, you'll end at like a beach area that you can go swimming in the Mediterranean on one side and in the Atlantic. Is that right? Atlantic on the other side. And women, right? So when you're at the beach for full game, like you could dress in beach wear, bikini top, onesie, whatever it is. But when you're not at the beach, that's not okay to walk around like that, right? Absolutely not okay. Typically when you go to the beach in Morocco, you'll go to a marketplace and then there's a beach near the marketplace. One example I want to share is that it's not okay to walk in your beachwear in the market. Absolutely not okay. To compound that complicated situation, we were there during Ramadan, right?
Yep.
And so during that time, folks are fasting, but they also are practicing modesty to its extreme too, right? And so we had students who are getting onto the bus just in their bikinis and saying, well, I'm comfortable like this, like if I'm okay, like I don't feel uncomfortable, like I'm totally fine. But that's not okay, right? Because that is them saying, well, in the US, I can do this. Here, I can't do that, but I'm comfortable like this. If people are staring at me, that's okay. That's technically something that's very ethnocentric, right? You're not meaning to be ethnocentric because you're just saying, what you're saying is, I'm comfortable. If people are staring at me, that's fine. But it makes others around you uncomfortable, right? And so I think that is kind of what I want you to start thinking about. Whenever you're saying like, oh, well, I'm comfortable, if you're not comfortable, that's okay. Like the sorry, not sorry attitude may be linked to a little bit of ethnocentrism, okay? Especially when you're trying to experience a culture that is really different than yours. Make sense?
Right, and I think that's a really good thing, and we'll do it without even knowing.
Right.
And so you have to check each other.
Right.
And because I've been several times, I kind of know a little bit about the culture already, but there was even stuff that I was saying or doing that I was just like, in my head, like, wait, that wasn't cool, or hey, I shouldn't have said that.
Yes.
So we have to really check each other and really tell each other. Like, an example is, I was at the Palace of Versailles in the gardens. Now, their gardens are like a holy site. Like, that is like their thing. The Palace of Versailles is in Paris. It's the biggest, well, actually it's in Versailles. It's the biggest palace in the world, and they're known for their gardens. I was with a student, and we were walking in the gardens, and she saw this beautiful lilac bush, literally, and went up to it to go grab and yank at it so she could put it on her. And I was like, I literally was like, no! It was like slow-mo. And then like these French women in front of us literally turned around and just were yelling at her in French. And then the minute they started yelling, she was just like, oh. And then she stopped. And then I was just like, yo, you can't do that over here. Like that, this is a historic treasure. Like it's like you picking up a painting or a vase that's 300 or 400 years old and like flipping it in the air. You don't do that at all.
Right.
So that was just kind of one of many examples. But I mean, I think to her, she was like, hey, this is okay. It's just a flower, you know? I do this in the US all the time. You just pick a flower, like walking down the mall, you know, I see a daisy or whatever.
Yeah.
We're cool. And it's not like that in some areas. In most areas it's not, especially not in the US. So that was just my example.
Yeah, that's a good example because that's so small and so you think it's so like, what is it, nonchalant, right? You're like, oh, it's so insignificant, but totally wrong, like totally disrespecting a culture, right? And so think about those things. Some of the stuff that I wanted to show you today. Sorry, I keep moving, Angie. Follow me. So how many of you know that we have a Facebook group? Yeah? Okay, so if you don't have Facebook, you're missing out on some good information. So I went ahead and went on our old Facebook group and tried to find some infographics that were really helpful. And this is one of the infographics that I thought was really helpful to our students, if I could zoom in on it. Whoa! Okay, so I think this will also help. Can you all even see that?
Let me see if I can turn the light off a little bit so
Let me just look it
it's not
up.
that glare.
Is it not gonna open? Traveling to Sweden infographic. Let's take this out. Oh, here it is. Thanks. Okay. So, I thought this was helpful, and this is kind of what we did. Oh my goodness. This is kind of what we did. We went in on, we tried to share as many infographics. If you see it before I do, point it out. Because there are so many things that are different, right? And different in a good. Oh my gosh, we just want to see the infographic. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to, so obviously you all know this, right? You don't need a visa, we all have our passports that we're going to be taking. Make sure that if you don't have a US passport that you let your advisors know, because